I don't associate with black women. Those were the exact words Dante used. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. His tone was calm, almost clinical, like a surgeon holding a scalpel. Each word was deliberate, precise, and devastating. It sliced cleanly through the air and landed exactly where her confidence lived, cutting deeper than any shout ever could. For a moment, everything stood still. The laughter in the background faded. The music became distant. Even the world itself seemed to pause, as if it too felt the weight of what had just been said. And just like that, something in her shifted. But before we dive into how it all unraveled, how a single sentence could carry so much history, pain, and consequence, let's take it back to where it all began. Before we continue, take a second to support the channel. If you love powerful, emotional stories like this, the kind that stay with you long after they end, make sure you hit the subscribe button, like this video, and turn on notifications so you never miss a story. This is Afro Soul Love Tales, where we tell the stories others won't. Now back to the story. Zara Mitchell had always known the sting of being overlooked, but nothing in her 27 years had prepared her for Dante Vitello's words. She walked into the lobby of his office building, clipboard in hand, heels clicking against marble floors polished so brightly they reflected ambition itself. The kind of ambition that smelled of power and control, of boardroom meetings where a single sentence could end someone's future. She had been in rooms like this before. She had always left them standing. Today felt different. She couldn't explain why, just a tightness in her chest that started in the elevator and hadn't left. She had pitched to bigger companies, served higher profile events. But something about the way this building looked at her through its glass made her want to stand straighter and breathe slower. Dante hadn't noticed her yet, or so she thought. Then he did, and the world shifted. I don't associate with black women. His words weren't loud. They had the precision of a scalpel slicing through the air and straight into her chest, finding the exact place where confidence lived and cutting through it clean. The tray in her hands trembled. The sandwiches, arranged neatly for the charity event pitch, threatened to slide. She didn't flinch. A reaction would give him power. She couldn't afford that. Not here. Not in front of these people. Zara's pulse thudded like a drum. Years of quiet resilience, of being patient, polite, invisible, had led her here. And still, those words felt like a public execution. Around her, the office buzzed with assistants and interns who pretended not to notice. Their studied indifference was its own cruelty. They had heard. Every single one of them had heard. Imani, her best friend and business partner, stood a few steps behind, lips pressed tight, a look Zara knew meant, I will end this man, held together only by the thinnest thread of professionalism. And then there was Amara, their part-time event assistant, who had gone completely still beside the dessert cart. One mini quiche frozen halfway to her mouth, eyes wide as satellite dishes. Later she would whisper, I almost threw that quiche at him. I want you to know that. I had full aim. Zara had almost smiled at that. Almost. Her hands stayed steady. She set the tray down carefully and said nothing. Silence was her shield. She let him move on, cataloging every detail. The slight narrowing of his eyes when he realized she had heard. The casual flick of his wrist. The imperceptible smirk he thought was private. She stored it all. She would need it later. When the office finally emptied, Zara sat in her car, gripping the steering wheel until her knuckles ached. Imani spoke first. He said it like he was ordering coffee. Brittle humor, protective, holding grief at arm's length so neither of them would have to touch it directly. Pretty much, Zara replied, voice clipped and controlled. She didn't cry. Not yet. She knew the world didn't reward crying, it punished it. Then came the email. From the very coordinator of the event Dante was attending. They wanted Zara's company Sable and Spice for the gala. 100 high-profile guests, press coverage, the kind of exposure that could change everything overnight. The irony was almost beautiful. The man who had tried to erase her with 7 words had just handed her the door she'd been knocking on for years. Her fingers trembled not from fear, but from the sheer weight of it. Accepting meant walking back into a world that had already tried to crush her. Refusing meant survival, slow, stagnant, shrinking survival. The kind that looked safe from the outside but hollowed you out from within. She thought of the numbers she'd memorized. 12 months to break even, 8 confirmed bookings, 1 massive client still unclaimed. Years of sacrifice had led her here. She refused to let one man's ignorance decide her direction. She typed her reply: warmth, professionalism, quiet defiance. Sent. Her phone pinged. A news alert: Dante Vitello, CEO of Vitello Holdings, cleared of federal fraud charges. Again, untouchable, privileged, unbothered. And still she had to walk into his world. Imani squeezed her shoulder once, hard. You built this. Don't let his words make you forget that. Zara exhaled slowly. Tonight she would mourn for exactly 90 seconds in the shower. Tomorrow she would wear her red dress. Tomorrow she would face him. If you've ever been humiliated in public, tell me, what would you do? Where are you watching from? Subscribe if you're ready for this. Morning arrived like a blade of light slicing across the city. Zara stood in front of her bedroom mirror, the red dress draped across her hands like armor. It wasn't just fabric. It was a declaration: visibility, defiance, a refusal to disappear. She had bought it 2 years ago for a client dinner that had been canceled the morning of. It had hung in her closet ever since, waiting for a moment worthy of it. She slipped it on. It hugged every curve, cut just above the knee, the color unapologetic against her skin. She turned once in the mirror, slowly, the way her mother used to tell her to own the room before you enter it. She looked fierce. She also looked terrified. Both things were true, and she had learned long ago that courage wasn't the absence of fear, it was showing up in the red dress anyway. Imani appeared in the doorway, coffee in hand, eyes steady. Tonight isn't about him, it's about you. Zara nodded. She didn't trust her voice yet. Amara appeared behind Imani, squinting at the dress with the focus of someone making a very serious assessment. Okay, but if he says something stupid again, I'm accidentally spilling the consommé. I've already rehearsed the fall. It's very convincing. Amara. Imani closed her eyes slowly. I said accidentally. Despite everything, despite the tightness in her chest and the memory of his words still sharp as glass, Zara laughed. It lasted 3 seconds, but it was real, and she needed it more than she knew. The venue smelled of ambition and antiseptic. Zara moved through the setup like water through stone trays, balanced, instructions precise, her team moving in the choreography they had rehearsed 100 times. The garnish, the silver polish, the ice levels in the champagne buckets. She checked everything twice. She could not afford imperfection, not tonight, not in his room. Then Dante entered, not announced, not flanked by assistants. He simply appeared, gliding through the space like a man who had never once questioned his right to occupy any room he entered. When their eyes met across the noise and motion of the floor, the air shifted. Not fear, something heavier, recognition, challenge. Two people who both knew this evening was about something larger than food. Zara turned away first, deliberately. Let him wonder what that meant. From the corner of her eye, she caught him watching her work, not with the casual dismissal of their first meeting, but with the careful attention of someone quietly updating their calculations. She filed it away and refused to let herself feel it. Not yet. Sandra, the events coordinator, moved beside her all evening, checking plates, presentation angles, timing. Zara answered every question with precision and ease, never losing composure, never letting the pressure show on her face. She had run dozens of events in rooms that didn't want her there. She knew how to make a space submit to her standards, even when it resisted her presence. And Dante lingered at the edges of the room, materializing near a guest cluster, murmuring a quiet, remarkable, without directing it at anyone in particular. No apology, no acknowledgement of what he'd said in that lobby. Just a word left hanging in the air, as though he expected the room itself to receive it. She didn't catch it, let it fall. The gala rose to full-life chandeliers blazing, the low hum of wealth braiding through conversation and crystal. Zara's team was flawless. Every course landed perfectly. Every guest who sought out the catering manager left the exchange impressed. She had built this evening from the ground up. Every detail, every decision, every plate. Dante was somewhere in that crowd, watching a room that her hands had shaped. She let herself feel that. Just for a moment, then she put it away and went back to work. By night's end, a single email waited on her phone. Heavy cream letterhead, embossed initials pressed into the header like a brand. DV, 5 words. Dinner, Thursday, 7 p.m. My office, not a question. She forwarded it to Imani without a single word of her own. Imani's reply came in 30 seconds flat. Don't you dare say no. Amara's followed 4 seconds later. I'll iron your navy dress. You're going. This is not up for discussion. Zara locked her phone, straightened her shoulders, walked back out into the light. Would you have dinner with someone who humiliated you if it meant everything for your career? Comment below. Subscribe, this story is just getting started. The email had the tone of a summons. Zara read it 3 times before she replied, a brief, professional confirmation that gave nothing away. No enthusiasm, no hesitation, just the clean, neutral language of someone who had been in difficult rooms before and had always walked out. She chose navy blue. Not the red dress that was armor for open battle. This was strategy. A structured sheath, modest cut, fabric that moved with quiet authority and said nothing louder than it needed to. She stood in front of the mirror and practiced her stillness. The thing people never told you about high-stakes rooms was that your face was as important as your words. She had learned to make hers unreadable. Imani called twice. Zara let it ring. She needed silence before walking into noise. Amara texted instead. I put extra mints in your bag. Also a granola bar in case you need to leave fast. Also, I'm praying for you. Also, you're going to destroy him. Zara read it in the elevator and felt something loosen in her chest. The car ride downtown was wordless. City lights blurred past like constellations retreating from dawn. Every red light felt like a pulse she couldn't slow. She ran through her numbers in her head, the contract value, the exposure, what one confirmed Vitello partnership would mean for Sable and Spice's next 18 months. She ran them not because she needed to, but because numbers grounded her when emotion threatened to take over. When the glass and steel tower of Vitello Holdings came into view, she allowed herself one full breath. Then she walked in. Dante was already there, leaning against the elevator wall, like a man who had never once waited for anything in his life and didn't intend to start. When his eyes landed on her, something passed through them. Not the casual dismissal of their first meeting, something more unsettling and more honest, attention. Ms. Mitchell, he said, voice controlled and deliberate. You look capable tonight, capable. She filed the word away like evidence. A man like Dante Vitello didn't choose words carelessly. Capable was not a compliment. It was a placement, an attempt to position her as functional rather than formidable. She noted it and said nothing. His office was a theater of wealth, floor-to-ceiling windows, gold accents, furniture that whispered of old money and unquestioned confidence. He gestured toward a chair. She chose the one nearest the window, where shadows fell across her face on her terms. Light was leverage. She had learned that the hard way. The conversation began civilly. He acknowledged Sable and Spice's growing reputation. He praised the gala execution with the restrained precision of a man unaccustomed to praising anyone. He was almost warm, and the warmth made her sharper, not softer, because she had learned that charm from powerful men was rarely free. Then the mask slipped. You're talented, he said, tracing the rim of his glass. But you don't quite fit the world I operate in. You understand that. The same poison repackaged in silk. Zara held his gaze without blinking, without flinching, without giving him the reaction his words were designed to produce. I've never tried to fit, she said, voice even as still water. I focus on results. If that's not sufficient, I'll excuse myself now and we'll both move forward. A silence fell, long, deliberate, the kind that reveals who controls a room. Dante set down his glass. Something in his expression shifted, subtle as a door opening 1 inch in a sealed wall. It's sufficient, he said. They negotiated for 20 minutes. 2 people who both understood this meeting had never been about food. Zara watched his hands. the way his fingers flexed when she didn't concede where he expected her to, the slight tension in his jaw when she redirected rather than retreated. She cataloged everything. She always did. Her phone buzzed beneath the table. A text from Sandra. Contract approved. You're confirmed for the Vitello private family event. Tia. The victory moved through her quietly, like warmth spreading through cold hands after a long winter. She stood to leave. Dante walked her to the elevator without invitation, which told her more than anything he'd said all evening. At the door, he paused. Bold people make dangerous enemies, Ms. Mitchell. She met his eyes without hesitation. Bold people also make history. She stepped into the night. Imani was parked outside, engine running. The moment Zara got in, she exhaled everything she'd been holding for 2 hours. Well? Imani asked. We got the contract. Imani screamed loud enough to startle a passing cyclist. Zara laughed until her eyes watered. She hadn't done that in months. The Vitello Holdings Gala was a world unto itself. The city glittered 40 floors below like diamonds scattered across dark velvet. Inside, wealth pulsed through every surface, champagne towers, chandelier light fracturing across couture and cufflinks, voices pitched to the frequency of people who had never once questioned whether they belonged. Every detail of the room announced the same thing: this is not for everyone. Zara had heard that message her entire life. She had decided long ago it wasn't meant for her. She moved through the evening with quiet precision, directing her team, adjusting details, making invisible the thousand small decisions that made a night feel effortless. She had worn the red dress again. Imani had insisted. They already know you're here. Might as well let them feel it, Amara had whispered before they entered, with the gravity of someone delivering battlefield strategy. If anyone looks at you sideways, I will drop a tray, accidentally, with full eye contact and zero remorse. Zara had squeezed her arm and told her to behave. Amara had nodded in a way that did not constitute agreement. Dante was across the room when Zara arrived, surrounded by dark suits, commanding without visible effort, the kind of man who drew attention the way gravity draws objects, silently, inevitably, without trying. Their eyes met once across the crowd. Brief, deliberate, both of them looked away. The rules of this particular game were unspoken but fully understood by both players. The first strike didn't come from him. It came from a woman in pearl champagne glass tilted in her hand, moving past the appetizer station with the unhurried entitlement of someone who had never once been asked to wait. She leaned toward the man beside her and said, pitched just loud enough to be heard by anyone paying attention, "I'm not sure someone like her should be running the room." Zara felt the heat rise instantly, the old familiar burn behind her sternum, the tightening along her jaw, the surge of feeling that her body had learned to produce on cue whenever the world reminded her of what it thought of her. She had felt it 100 times, in vendor meetings, in pitch rooms, in lobbies just like the one where Dante Vitello had tried to reduce her to nothing with 7 words. She had also learned, over years of quiet practice, what to do with that heat. She let it pass through her. Then she turned and smiled at the woman, not warmly, not apologetically. A controlled, unhurried smile that said, with perfect clarity, "I heard every word, and I am entirely unbothered." The woman's expression flickered. Uncertainty. The specific discomfort of someone who expected a wound and found armor instead. She moved on. From somewhere across the room, Dante had watched the exchange. Zara didn't know how much he'd caught. She didn't look to find out. Imani appeared at her elbow within seconds. "I saw that. I handled it," Zara said quietly. Amara's stress eating the canapes. Let her. By 10 o'clock the room had settled into its deeper rhythm, loosened ties, louder laughter, the comfortable arrogance of people fully at ease in their own kingdom. Zara's team was flawless. Every course landed with precision. 3 separate guests sought her out to request her card. She handed each one over with a smile that cost her nothing and was worth everything. Then Dante approached. Alone, no entourage. He moved through the crowd with the economy of motion of a man who never wasted a step, and stopped beside her at the terrace doors, looking out at the city below without preamble. "The woman in pearls," he said, voice low. Her event contract with Vitello Holdings won't be renewed. Zara turned to look at him. His expression was controlled but no longer closed. What she said was unacceptable. In my room. A pause, brief but weighted. I should have addressed it sooner. It wasn't an apology for what he had said. He wasn't there yet. But it was something, a fracture in the wall, the first genuine thing he had offered her since the moment they met. And Zara, who had learned to read silence as fluently as speech, heard exactly what it meant. He was paying attention in a way he hadn't expected to. "Thank you," she said simply, not warmly, not coldly, just honestly. He nodded once, walked back into the crowd, and Zara stood at the terrace doors, the city blazing below her, understanding for the first time that she was no longer just a vendor in his world. She was a variable he hadn't planned for, and that was exactly where she needed to be. Did Dante just show his first real crack? Is he changing, or is this another calculated move? Comment below. Subscribe. The private Vitello family gathering was held in a townhouse that breathed old money, high ceilings, antique light fittings, the particular quiet of people who had never needed to raise their voices to be heard. Zara arrived an hour early. She always did. She and Imani set up in practiced silence, the rhythm of women who had built something real from nothing. Late nights, vendor negotiations, rejection emails, the specific exhaustion of being twice as good and half as loud. Every plate they arranged was a quiet declaration. Amara arrived 12 minutes late, slightly breathless, carrying an extra tray of garnishes nobody had asked for, and wearing an expression of complete innocence. "I panicked and made more," she whispered. "I don't know why. It felt necessary. Don't look at me like that." Imani pointed to a corner. Amara went to the corner. The guests filtered in: Dante's family, business associates, people who regarded Zara's team the way people regard furniture, functional, present, beneath acknowledgement. She had been looked at that way her entire career. She had stopped letting it reach her long ago. Dante arrived last. He moved through the room with practiced ease, greeting family, shaking hands, the performance of a man in his natural habitat. His eyes found Zara within the first minute. She noticed. She didn't react. The evening unfolded with precision. Every course executed flawlessly. Zara circulated quietly, adjusting, checking, staying composed through conversations she wasn't part of and wasn't meant to hear. Halfway through the main course, a commotion erupted near the kitchen. One of the venue's own staff had mishandled a sauce station. A dish crashed, splattering across the counter, chaos threatening to ripple into the dining room. Zara was already moving before anyone called for her. She redirected her team, contained the situation, had a replacement plated, and delivered in under 4 minutes. The guests barely noticed. That was the point. She emerged from the kitchen doorway to find Dante standing close, watching. 4 minutes, he said quietly. 3.5, she corrected. A silence settled between them, different from before. Not the silence of power or challenge, something quieter, more honest. "I owe you more than a corrected timeline," he said. Zara went still. "What I said when we first met." His voice dropped, careful, deliberate, like a man choosing words he knew couldn't be taken back. It was indefensible. "I won't pretend otherwise." He held her gaze. "And watching you work these past weeks, what you've built, how you operate it, has demanded something from me I wasn't prepared to give." "What's that?" she asked. "Accountability." The room continued around them, oblivious. Zara felt the full weight of the moment. Every morning she'd steadied herself in the car before going back inside. Every contract lost to someone with fewer skills and more privilege. Every room she'd had to quietly earn her place in. She didn't let any of it show on her face. "Accountability without change is just a speech, Mr. Vitello," she said softly. "I'll be watching to see which one this is." She walked back to her team, shoulders straight, heartbeat steady. By the end of the evening, 3 of Dante's associates had requested Sable and Spice's contact details. Sandra confirmed a formal partnership proposal by end of week. Imani held her arm in the car on the way home and didn't let go. Amara had somehow acquired a small plate of leftover desserts, and was eating them without remorse in the back seat. Zara stared at the city, the same skyline that had told her she didn't belong, the same streets she'd driven home in silence after losing contracts to people with fewer skills and better last names, the same light she had promised herself, on more than one sleepless night, that she would one day be part of. Her phone buzzed. Unknown number. "You've done well, but the people who sent Dante to test you won't be as patient as he has been. Watch yourself, Ms. Mitchell. The real game starts now." She read it twice. Her fingers didn't tremble. She locked the phone, leaned her head back, and looked at the city with completely new eyes. Someone had been watching the entire time, someone with enough access to know Dante's moves before he made them, someone who saw her not as a caterer, not as a footnote, but as a threat worth monitoring. She had spent years being invisible. Being a threat was a promotion. Episode 2 is coming. Who sent that message? What do they want? Drop your theories in the comments. Subscribe and turn on notifications. Episode 2 brings the betrayal, the revelation, and the war you didn't see coming. Where are you watching from?